Okay, everybody have a copy? Good. Any lingering questions on meditation or something last week? Wonderful. Let's move on. We're on page 9, chapter 1. The Hui Neng, not yet the patriarch, is relating the circumstances of his life, particularly his life in the way. And at this point, just to refresh, he's heard one line from a text called the Vajra Sutra, and there's a little footnote on the bottom of that. It's actually the Vajra Chidika Sutra, and it's out of the Prajna Paramita tradition, which is the wisdom tradition. So it's dealing with very deep and fundamental insights into the nature of reality, fairly direct. This sutra is really another example of questions and answers. The sutra turns on the doubts of a disciple called Subhuti, and Subhuti is asking the Buddha a series of questions, very interesting questions, about what it means to cultivate, what's the attainment you get when you cultivate, what does emptiness mean, and so forth. And again, it's a dialogue. Some of the most interesting texts are the dialogue. So the question is posed by the student or the disciple, and the teacher answers specifically to that student's mind. But one of the key hallmarks of the Vajra Sutra is the famous passage when Subhuti asked, how is it then I should orient myself? How should I be in the world? How should I be so that I can manifest the state of insight and wisdom and understanding and also liberation from suffering, from dissatisfaction? And the Buddha then says the line that the Sixth Patriarch himself had heard when he was delivering the wood to the inn, and that line is, let your mind be unattached, clinging to nothing. So this is the fundamental teaching that he gets. And of course, because he's asking questions, because he's seeking, he's thinking that this liberation and this wisdom is something that he has to strive for to get. And the Buddha's answer throws him off immediately. What do you mean, clinging to nothing, seeking nothing, wanting nothing, craving nothing? Let your mind be ungrasping, unattached. And so that begins then a series of other questions. But one of the passages that comes back, the Buddha responds and he said, so what is it that you, Subhuti, you think? Let's go the other way. Let your mind be fevered and excited and seeking for everything. And he says, look at the nature of things. Aren't they all impermanent and in flux? There's nothing substantial or real. Everything is changing from matter and energy, what we call pratitya samyapada, conditioned arising. Things arise, they dwell, they fade, they disappear, they change and transform. This is a constant flux. So he says, just remember, all conditioned things are like dreams, illusions, bubbles, shadows, drops of dew, and a lightning flash. It's not that they don't exist, they do, but they don't stay. So that's the famous line from the Vajra Sutra. So the Sixth Patriarch now comes, hearing that, drops everything. It confirms something he already understands. This is the important point. He's not confused about that line. He doesn't know the full import of it, but he knows that's the most meaningful thing he's heard in all his years. And it actually triggers a deep response in him that causes him to reorient his life completely. Now, some of you might think, well, yeah, he was just a woodcutter, big deal, dropping the woodcutting thing. But he doesn't drop the woodcutting thing and go off for some profession or try to go to school to get exams to get into the imperial system. He actually turns his way even further away from the world. You could say all he was doing was gathering wood at that point. I mean, he had a marginal existence, and the only relationship that he has that we can tell that was significant was taking care of his mother. So upon hearing this, it's like some chain breaks from even that meager existence that he was still onto, and he says, I have to put this all down to pursue this matter. We can only imagine. I mean, you have to sort of use imagination here to get inside of his mind and his life to figure out what was going on here for him to take this next radical step. And again, I want to stress from his point of view, I don't think this is what we call renunciation. Often when people go forth, and that's the word that's used, pravraj, to go forth, in Chinese they say chujia, to leave the home. It depends on the angle, whether you're going from someplace or towards something, half full, half empty, you know, the engineer joke, that kind of thing. But the point is, he is not giving up and renouncing. It's not like this, oh gosh, I guess I'll have to put it down to go. He's actually happy and excited and filled with joy of going forth and leaving everything behind. So that shows to some extent he already understands the line, let your mind be unattached, clinging nothing. That unclingingness is joy and liberation in itself. It's not getting what you want, it's not wanting to get. And he understands this. That's pretty unique. So he comes, and of course he's really excited, and last week we got into how he kind of missed the scene. He walks into the monastery and thinks, this is the way place of the fifth patriarch. Everybody here must have their mind set on Bodhi. And of course, they'd all be Dharma friends. So when he comes in, and the patriarch says, well, you know, I don't know if you have what it takes. You come from the south, and you're a barbarian, meaning an outsider who's illiterate. And he gives his famous response, the Buddha nature isn't, our bodies are different, but the Buddha nature is essentially the same. At that point, the fifth patriarch thinks, this guy's got potential. He tells him to go to work. And of course, the tension last week was he took this as another Chan question or another Dhyana question, which is, work? What work do I have to do? I'm always working on my mind ground. My mind ground, no. He said, no, I mean, get out of here, go to work. So let's pick up then why he goes to work. He says, I withdrew to the back building where a laborer, now the laborer could be a layperson or it could be somebody who's a monk or a novice, who's doing work. So at the monastery, it's a relatively self-contained community, depending on where it is and what time in history it is. But generally speaking, at the monastery, most of the food is grown there that they eat. They have simple clothes that they wear, so there's no need for access to, shopping malls or the equivalent. They take vows of voluntary poverty so that the food, in one tradition you go out with your alms bowl to get food. In this tradition, food is given by the same group of people, but they come to the monastery and give the food there. So the combination of donations coming in and what they grow and take care of in themselves pretty much sustains them. Food and medicine and clothing are the essentials that they need, roof over their head, but a lot of times they're building it themselves. They're constructing it. We got a little flavor of this early in the 70s when we were following our teacher. We just had an abandoned mattress factory in San Francisco in the Mission District. Somebody actually showed me a picture of it. They went by the other day and took pictures, and I was like, when I saw the pictures of the monastery, it was just like this incredible rush of memory, impressions, and feeling, because that was the place where I did my turnaround. If you some place or some that you've been where you've done a radical change, when you go back to it, it triggers all that stuff. So, and interestingly, it's still called the monastery, but it's not the Buddhist monastery. And I think it's either a place for students coming from abroad, and they wanted to name the monastery because they knew it used to be a monastery. So the brick building still is there, and I was looking at the pictures on the outside, and I could see the fire escape that the monk snuck out with his berry pies, and all these things came back to me. In any event, there we didn't have anything, and like those bowing benches you see in the back there, we made those, not those are pretty nice. The ones we made were from scratch. We had some scratch plywood and saws, we cut it up. Master showed us how to build them and bevel them at a slight angle. Somebody donated some polyurethane, yellow stuff, and we just did it and nailed it and put it together. We made our eating tables the same way. They were rickety. you often had to hold the table with one hand and eat with the other, so the table didn't turn over. Almost everything we had there, we put together. We took the lighting out, put in new lighting. We learned how to do plumbing, more or less. Sometimes during sessions when the toilets got used a little, we realized the limitations of plumbing without a contract license and, and so forth, because it would back up. But then the master would say, well, you can use that as a contemplation too on the nature of the body and impermanence. So anyhow, that's the spirit of a monastery. So it says a laborer. He went back where he put to work splitting firewood and thrashing rice on this hulling pestle, which is, I explained, is like an exercise machine, and the pestle comes down, so you really... Now the text begins tonight. I spent more than 8 months at this work when the patriarch unexpectedly came one day to see me and said, quote, I think your insights can be of some use, but I was afraid that bad people would harm you. That is why I haven't spoken to you. Do you understand the situation? I replied, Hui Neng saying, I replied, your disciple understands the master's intention and has avoided the front hall so as not to call attention to myself. Wow. So this is quite a bit of a departure from where we left him last week. He goes to work, while he's quietly working, he's now taking in what's going on at the monastery. He's sensitive, he's aware, he can see what people's intentions are, the way they're conducting themselves, and he right away gets the vibe that there's a lot of energy in the air for competing over this prize. That most of the people here at this monastery are here not for the reason he said. What was the reason he came? Do you remember? Yeah, he said, I only want to be a Buddha. That's why he came. But everybody else wants the symbols of the Buddha, which is the robe and the bowl that the fifth patriarch is carrying. He doesn't want the symbols. He wants the substance. He doesn't even know about the robe and bowl. He's not interested in this at all. He's actually interested in the real thing. So he's coming in and assuming everybody else is there for the same reason. Quickly he picks up, just by his observations, that people's intentions are very different than his own. Now that isn't to say there aren't people there. There might be. But the overall energy here is one of competition, of fighting, of obviously that would go with what other emotions or feelings? Anger, yeah, greed, a little envy and jealousy. Everybody contemplating their Watto, but contemplating each other. Is she getting ahead? Is he beating me? Can he sit longer? Does she, and so on and so forth. Was her answer that she gave better than my answer? And then does that mean she's got an edge on that kind of cultivation. So he says, I know he recognizes his insights, but he said, I told you to sort of chill it because I feel that bad people would harm you. A lot of people, and my students particularly, read this part of the text and they come up with a very obvious question. Anybody want to guess what the obvious question is here?
Why didn't he say something before?
No. Who? The
fifth patriarch.
Oh.
Like, just clue him in.
Well, you could say, why didn't he clue him in? But he may not clue him in because they're watching him so acutely. They're watching every move that the fifth patriarch is making because they're afraid that he might transmit some insight or dharma that they would miss out on. So he's being really, and we'll see this later, when he doesn't come down to eat. And everybody's like really nervous now. He hasn't showed up for meals. What's going on? Has he left? Is there something secret going on? So he can't reveal himself too, how should we say, forthrightly. It all has to be sort of innuendo.
Okay, how about if he's so powerful, why can't he put these guys into shape?
That's another question. Right now it doesn't say he's so powerful, but it just says he's a Dharma heir. Yes? Right, it's close to this. It's like, wait a minute, isn't this a Buddhist monastery? Where would the bad people come from? How could there be bad people at the monastery, especially bad people who took the full precepts and are cultivating the way? And people are sort of shocked at this prospect that in the religious life and the spiritual life, there can be this bad intention, this unwholesome desire and so forth. It's there. I don't think necessarily you'll see later what the patriarch is saying here, and you'll see it in his verse contest he's going to set up. In other words, the monastery alone, the temple alone, the church alone does not make you holy, does not make you pure, does not make you good. That is something that comes from your own heart and mind. And if your own heart and mind is good and pure, then any place you are is a temple, is the monastery, is a church. Conversely, if it's not, then the temple and monastery and church just turn into a sordid place, not unlike things in the world. So his teaching is called, he teaches what's called Xindi, mind ground teaching, that everything comes from our mind. So our attitudes and our dispositions and our mind are what create our reality and not the other way around. So if you want to escape from suffering, you have to then release your own mind that's creating the suffering and the conditions and so forth. So this is called the self-essential nature teaching. The Sixth Patriarch at all times teaches to and from that essential nature. So when he says, what we have here is a monastery, don't be misled that there's something special about the monastery per se, unless we make it special through our own cultivation. So he's saying simply the mind, and later he'll say this, that the true mind is the monastery, and the monastery is the true mind. There is no other. This is really very powerful teaching. So he says, Hui Neng replies, I understood your intentions, and I've now avoided. He's really pulled back. I've avoided even going to the front hall in order to call attention. The front hall is where the lectures take place. It's where everybody comes, gathers together. There's a lot of activity there. So, jumps ahead. One day, the patriarch summoned all of his disciples, and this is the fifth patriarch, and said to them, I tell you, for all people the matter of birth and death is a serious concern. Yet all day long you just seek good fortune and happiness rather than trying to escape the bitter sea of birth and death. If you're confused about your essential nature, how can blessing save you? I want all of you to draw upon your wisdom and use the prajna essence of your original mind to compose a verse to show me. If you understand the great meaning, I will pass on to making you the sixth patriarch. Go now. This is an urgent issue. Thinking about it is useless. Someone who has experienced the essential nature should see it immediately upon hearing these words. One who perceives like this could see it even in the heat of battle facing whirling swords. This is in the last line is an expression in the Chinese tradition of a kind of equipoise in the middle of battle. So when you really have the gong fu, even while things are just going crazy around you, you're centered. You're the eye of the hurricane, so to speak. And he's saying someone who sees his essential nature is so freed up from being moved by external conditions that no matter what's happening around, they're always in that state of equanimity. Doesn't mean they're zoned out. They're fully aware, fully alert, but at the same time, not moved off center, not moved off kilter. And so he's saying, if you understand your essential nature, it's that immediate and that fast. This later will be referenced when he talks about his teaching, and he gives his teaching in negative. It's woo this, woo that, woo this, not this, not this, not this. But one of the things it's not is not memory or recollection. And what he means by that is if you understand the Dharma directly through your own nature, it's not something you have to remember or recollect or bring to mind. It is available at all times. You're never apart from it. You and it are one and the same. So if somebody says, ask you a Dharma question or ask you something, oh gosh, I remember, I saw it, and where was that? It was like, and he's saying, no, my teaching isn't that. That's still secondary. Primary, you understand that the teachings come from your own mind. All sutras come from your own mind. You have direct access to it. If you have to go looking it up, you're still not quite at that ground. So that's what he's doing here in this sense of saying whirling swords. So let's look at this a little bit. It's an interesting passage. I keep reading this and I see it in many ways over time, but one way you could see it is the fifth patriarch really knows the energy here. And he knows that they're just on the edge vying for this. So he does a very clever thing. He creates a contest. And the contest is to give the idea of, well, let's assume, let's just for the sake of playful argument and absurdity, assume that I'm the patriarch, right, and you're all the disciples, right? Okay, just play with me. And don't think it is real, just a metaphor. And you're all wondering, well, is he going to get it? Does he like him more because he talks to him more? Or he's actually scolding her more? And I heard that scolding is a sign that you're favored and so forth. Or didn't he go to his room some night? I wonder what they talked about there. Or he's from the same province or the same state or the same city. So obviously there's and their family name maybe is the same. And you go through all these things. So he's thinking, okay, let's just make it level and equal, have a contest. Okay, what kind of contest are we going to have? Well, let's have a contest to see who can come up with the most awakened verse. That's good, because everybody there, his coming, except for the Sixth Patriarch, is coming from a fairly educated background. They're literate, and one of the things that's popular at this time is the writing of verses surrounding your state of awakening or enlightenment. That's why Su Dampo's famous story about fart is plays into this, because there is a style of people writing down their verses and then showing it to somebody else, and they go, whoa, I see the flavor of Chan there, or awakening, and they're usually 4-line verses or something. So he's thinking one way to do this, rather than select anybody, even though we might feel at this point he's already favoring Hui Neng, but if he just gives it to him outright, people will cry foul, unfair. So he's giving an exam, so to speak, and everybody gets the exam. And he proposes it a verse, but he's not just saying literary style here. We're looking for a particular erudition. We're looking for somebody whose verse really reflects a direct scene from the essential nature, from their original mind. But he frames this, first of all, by saying, you guys aren't really serious here. A lot of you are just messing around and wasting time. That's why he starts the line by saying, I'll tell you, the matter of birth and death is it's a grave concern. And what he's saying here is, he's talking about the biggest riddle and rub of human beings. To be human, to be alive, is to be faced with this riddle that we're born only to die, and we know this. Okay? No matter what you want to get into and move around, the basic common fact of human existence is everything that comes into being goes out. Okay? Nobody is freed from that, even though we keep striving to get freed from that, either through belief systems or technology or whatnot. The basic common truth is all beings that are born and come together age, get sick, age, and die, or sometimes very quickly, don't even age, don't even make it out of the womb sometimes. But the fact is that all that exists also passes away. Now this riddle, he says, this is the one great matter, okay? And you've all come here, hopefully, with the idea that you're going to explore this. Where did I come from and where am I going? And what's this brief interval in between all about? And so this is where Shakyamuni Buddha begins his search. He leaves the palace, he leaves home, because he encounters the signs of existence. He encounters aging, he encounters sickness, he encounters a corpse. And each one of these stuns him to the point that he goes back and he's depressed. He goes back to the palace, and text says he's actually despondent and depressed because his attendant tells him, this isn't just something that happened to you, and aging isn't something that just happened to you, it happens to everyone, you too, Prince. And so he starts asking himself, if this is the inevitable trajectory I'm on, what am I doing day to day, playing around, going to parties, thinking of taking over the throne and amassing property and wealth and going to war as a prince and so on? What is the point of all this if only, inevitably, inexorably, I will get old, my limbs and my faculties will fail me, I will then be beset by various sicknesses, my immune system will be compromised, and eventually I will go out like a candle being blown out in the wind. And so he's really troubled. His father isn't so much troubled by this. So there's one great scene in the Buddha Charita where the father's sitting there telling him, here's what's in store. I hope you're going to get this and this and this. And he's eating away and he stops. He says, Father, how can you be so calm and composed, eating there and thinking about your wealth, when all I see is the world is on fire? And his father's like, what? Huh? He says, the world is on fire. Everything is on fire with impermanence. The fire is burning everything. It's burning forms. It's burning, And he said, how can you sit there? I myself cannot be calm and think about this future you prepared for me when I see, literally, he's seen in a very real way that everything is just a total blur of changing, impermanent, including himself. And his father then realizes he may not be taking over the job. He may opt out because this kid's really serious about this. And the Buddha's saying to him, the prince is saying to him, how can you not be serious about it? How can you get to this place? You're just sort of drinking until you're oblivious and fall asleep and wake up the next day. How can you do that? I don't get how you do that. See, the father's saying, well, how are you going to leave this all behind? The palace, the concubines, the wealth, and he's saying, it's going to leave me. How are you not concerned about this? He can't figure his father out, and his father can't figure him out. Not the first time. So he says to them, not only are you not concerned about this, but all day long you seek for good fortune and happiness rather than to escape from this conundrum, rather than to resolve this. How would they be seeking for happiness and good fortune? Because he's talking now to monastics, remember. This is not the assembly that Hui Neng's addressing. That was a mixed assembly. This is all the people that have come to cultivate under the fifth patriarch. Would that make sense to you? That they would be going after happiness and good fortune in the religious life? How would they do that?
Some people come to way place, even big home. They have different choices. You can choose to go to the heaven if you want, and you have the way to go to heaven. You can cultivate, you can do a lot of donation and build a lot of things, and you can transfer this marriage to go to the heaven, enjoy the pleasure in the heavenly realm, but also you have the choice to end the birth and death here. So actually there are choices. There's not just one way to go. And birth and death is not just everyone's wish or every cultivator's way.
So essentially what's being said here is that in cultivating this realm of cause and effect and karma, there's certain intentional actions you can take that then return as good results, can return as blessings, can return as good fortune, can return as healthy body, and so on and so forth. And so what he's saying to them, if you're manipulating and playing in that realm, if you're playing that game, and I don't mean false, you're playing at that table, in case you think of it as a casino, you're playing at that table, chances are you might win, and you might get some return. But ultimately, the house always wins, and you're going to die. And even if you come back in a favorable existence, you still are caught in this turning wheel. And so you have to understand that from some point of view of the awakened mind, the turning back, in other words, death is not an end and birth is not a beginning, but it's one point in a cycle of existence that continues on and on, driven by karma and the results of those karma. When the Buddha himself was in the period of his stages of awakening, as he was really opening his mind was opening to full understanding. Just as clearly, he said, as you would hold an apple in the palm of your hand and say, that's an apple, I see that, even to the point you would crunch it and know it. He said, so did I see all my past existences. And he sat there, and it was real. He remembered. It wasn't he imagined. He actually recalled, just as you can say, what did I do yesterday? Oh yeah, I was la la la. And he said, and he saw life after life after life, this seemingly endless life series. As he was born, as he did certain deeds, as those came to fruition, as he then understood based on that again and again. He said, and now I figured out how I don't have to do this involuntary samsaric thing anymore. I figured out the cause of it, and once I know the cause and I pull this root out, I am free from this cycling.
You can maintain it.
Huh?
You can maintain that.
Oh, for sure.
Just that one insight.
No, it wasn't, yeah. This comes up again and again. It's not that he then was absolutely freed and had no possibility of going back into that. Of course he did, because that's the nature of how the free will of the mind works. But when he saw the root of it, when he deeply saw this is the cause, then he thought to himself, I clearly see this. I am not going to repeat this. And I know I could, but I'm not going to repeat this because it leads to this and this. Moreover, he then, the next step is, and there's some debate he has with this about actually then sharing this and teaching this, teaching the method that led to the insight. He can't teach and give you the insight. He realized that because that's a direct experience. But he can show you the method by which you see that for yourself, which is the basis of them setting up a career of teaching, the methodology for direct knowledge. But he can't give the direct knowledge. Anymore, there's a Midwestern expression my grandfather used. You can take the cows to the river, but you can't make them drink. In other words, you can show them water, you can take them there. Any of you who have worked with cows, you try to shove the cow's head down in, unless they want to go down, they're not going to go down. You can, curse at them and swear and whatnot. They're just going to look at you like, And so somehow disciples are like that too. You can lead them to the Dharma, but you can't make them have that insight. So, right. So what I'm saying is, do not think of this as some kind of abstraction or it's ending life, or it's ending existence, or it's a kind of nihilism. The ending of birth and death means you've solved the riddle and you're no more involuntarily reborn and controlled by your karma. So that it's not that objective existence ceases. It just ceases to be a problem or ceases to be out of your control. It's a very different state. So nirvana is not the ending of all existence. It's not like the going out of a light and then this vacuity. But it's something, and the Buddha never tried to put it into language we could grasp, because our very wanting to grasp it was the language that diminished the insight of what it was. So he said it's something that can be experienced but not explained. Okay, so this is key. But the point is, he experienced it directly himself. And he saw these past lives, and he saw, and once he was truly free and happy and liberated, and did no longer want to use karma to get reborn as a prince again. I mean, that's considered good fortune and blessings, but from his point of view, it was still not ultimate, and in many ways a trap. So a lot of people say, oh, the Buddha's talking about suffering and everything because we know about India. India is poor and impoverished. He must have been talking to everybody. Well, this is not talking to someone who's poor and impoverished. This is talking to someone who's made it. I don't know what the equivalent would be, but it'd be some really spoiled brat who inherited billions of dollars, sitting in some mansion, one of his 6 mansions around the world, and can buy and have anything he wants at the time, that kind of state, right? So, and the Buddha says, by the way, that's suffering too. So you might think about that. Why would that be suffering? Anyway, he says, you don't do that. You're confused about your essential nature. So how can blessings save you? How can these accumulation of these good fortune actually save you? Because you don't even understand who you are and what you're about. So he says, now, use your prajna, essence and wisdom to put this verse together and show me. And then he entices them a little bit. He's actually teaching them very expediently. He says, I know you all like that robe and bowl, right? You all want that robe and bowl. That's the prize. Now, do you notice he doesn't say, whoever wins gets to be a Buddha? He doesn't say that, because obviously you couldn't win that. So do not buy lottery tickets for this, okay? If someone says, gee, Berkeley Buddhist Monastery is having a raffle and whoever gets to be a Buddha. Hung Sure said so. No, it doesn't matter who said so. It's not going to work. You cannot get it through the lottery. And you can't win it by a contest. But he's saying you get the robe and bowl, which is really the prize they want. Some of them. So he says that'll be it. Now he says go. But then he does a little thing. He makes it a little tricky. If I said to you, now we're going back to our scenario, okay, I know you all want this old robe, because it symbolizes something to you, right? You can go out with it and do whatever you want to do, and people think, wow, you got the robe from so-and-so at Berkeley Buddhist Monastery. Okay. And then I tell you, by the way, to win the contest, you can't think. Huh? No, you can't think about the verse. You can't go to verse books and kind of copy and paste. You can't look at previous enlightened verses and, substitute that. He said, if you don't have it right now on the tip of your tongue, you're not going to win. But go ahead and try. So this is like, whoa, this is kind of like a bit of a setup here, right? So let's see what happens. We turn the page, and he says, the assembly received this instructions and withdrew. Okay? It means they went out taking the instruction, but they said to each other, we followers don't need to clear our minds and labor our wits to compose a verse to show the High Master. What's the use? So already they're bailing out of this. Now they may be bailing out because of the instruction you just gave, but it seems like if you listen to the rest of this, they're bailing out because they're yielding to the one who's in line to get it, Shenxiu. They say Shenxiu is our senior instructor. He's the first seated in the assembly now here. He is the one that is the instructor when the master's not instructing. He's the senior one.
They're all like super jumping on it. What happened to their competitive attitude? Is this a cultural thing?
Well, this is what we have to figure out here. It's like, good question. Why wouldn't they all compose it? It could be that in the sense he's the one that's in line. They all recognize he's in line, and so it might be a cultural thing of deference. They don't want to show him up.
Then why were they all
Well,
all of them?
well, because they didn't know it would come down to a verse.
Okay.
You see, until it came down to a verse, then they thought, we all had a shot if he's just going to do it by a dream or some special, thing, or by tossing the I Ching and said, oh, it looks like John's got it, or Harry's got it, or Mary's got it. But instead he's going to do a verse. Then they're thinking, wow, the verse thing, this is going to be really tough. And also they don't want to be put in a position of competing with their senior instructor, because he's the one that's supposedly elevated and advanced in this way. That's a double standard here. It's sort of like it also gets them out of the hot seat. They don't have to compose it now. So it's a lot of things going on. What's the use, they say? He's our senior instructor. Certainly he will get it. It would only be, and here's the answer, it would not only be an affront to him if we did it, but a waste of effort. So they're saying two things. It would be an affront to his pride, because he's a senior seated one. So if we did compose something better, it would be, he would lose face. But also, why waste effort to compose a verse when he's obviously the leading candidate for this? And the others hearing this all put their minds to rest, saying, from now on, we'll rely on Master Shenxiu. Why worry ourselves composing verses? So far, so good, right? Now it's only come down, but how is it a contest anymore? There's only one person that's going to put a verse up, we think. Because obviously the Sixth Patriarch can, he's illiterate. So Shenxiu then thought, let's go into this a little bit. The others are not submitting verses because I'm their senior teacher. I must compose a verse to submit to the High Master. If I don't present a verse, how will the Master know the depth or shallowness of my insight or understanding? If my intention in submitting a verse is to seek the Dharma, that's good. But if I covet the title of Patriarch, that's bad. How would that be any different from an ordinary person presuming to be a sage? But if I don't submit a verse, I will never get the Dharma. What a problem, what a problem. So, on one hand, you can see there's some clear thinking. If I compose a verse to get the Dharma, that's noble. On the other hand, if I compose it to get the robe and bowl, that's ignoble. And then I wouldn't be indifferent, But if I don't compose a verse, the Master won't know. If I do compose a verse, it might not show that I got it. He's tied himself into the knot. So when he says, the Patriarch says, you should see immediately upon hearing these words, like you're going into the heat of battle facing worldly swords. He has already, within a split second, tied himself up now. And he's created an immense problem for himself. Because one, it's all on him. Nobody else is composing verses, so he has to do it. But he's saying at the same time, in doing it, I will reveal to my teacher whether or not I have deep or shallow understanding. And my motive for this has to be 100% pure, and he knows that it's mixed. And so he's already worrying that according to the master's standard for composing a verse, he's already out of alignment here. Let's finish this because it's really good. We want to tease out his tension. So you imagine him here. Imagine yourself there. In front of the Fifth Patriarch's hall, there was a corridor 3 rooms long, whose wall was to be covered, was to be frescoed by a court artist, Lu Jun, with stories from the Lankavatara Sutra. Again, the Lankavatara and the Vajra Sutra and the Vimalakirti Sutra are all 3 texts that were used by Chan cultivators of this period. The Lankavatara has a really interesting passage where the Buddha says, someone asks, what is the Dharma? And he says, the Dharma is that which liberates and frees people from suffering. I say to you, if it's a teaching that is not to this and that, to the person and to their situation, teaching, it's not Dharma. This is very powerful because we think of Dharma as the texts, like the Bible, that's the Dharma. But what the Buddha is saying in the Lankavatara Sutra is only a Dharma if it is effective, efficacious, for leading to the end of suffering and insight. And that would have to be to that particular person, that particular situation, just as medicine is only medicine if it's given for the right illness. You can say, well, there's medicine, but it's not really medicine that causes healing unless it's given precisely for the illness at the right time and in the right doses and so forth. Otherwise, it could be poison. So too with the teaching.
Could it be Dharma for some but not others?
Well, he's saying it is Dharma because it's for. Dharma is for the insight and liberation and healing. If it's not for that, then it's not a teaching. It's because he's avoiding saying Dharma is some holy writ. Rather, Dharma is an expedient device to liberate, and once that's done, there's no more need for Dharma. That's where the Lankavatara goes, but you'll see in this text, the Sixth Patriarch is also going to be saying the same thing. So it's very interesting. Anyhow, Lankavatara Sutra, and a diagram of the lineage succession of the 5 patriarchs, the previous patriarchs, who's going to be on this wall, so they might be venerated by future generations. After composing his verse, Shenxiu made several attempts to submit it. Okay? But, whenever he reached the front hall, his mind was dazed and he broke out in a... He made 13 attempts over the course of 4 days, all unsuccessful. So you can see him. It's like it's out in the lobby here. It's just on the bulletin board. And all I'm saying is, before you leave tonight, post your verse there. And I'll look at it in a couple days. And so you go and, no, and you see anybody else is there? No, not. Back and forth until you break out a sweat, you're dazed, and you're completely discombobulated. Then he thought, it would be better to just write it on the wall so this high master might see it. If he says it's good, I will come forward and say, Shou did it, meaning Shenxiu did it. If instead he finds it acceptable, he would probably not come forth, but it means I've spent my years on the mountain in vain, receiving veneration from others. Where would I go from there? So now he's really at a crossroads. He says, I can do it sort of anonymously. I put the verse up, and if it passes, and the master says, whoa! Far out! Who did it? Well, I cannot tell a lie, is I, right? You like it? Is it good? Oh, it's outstanding! You get the Roman bowl. No, really, I don't do it. And you grab it. But he says, on the other hand, if it doesn't pass, and of course I don't have to acknowledge it, but I will now be facing the truth that I haven't really cultivated. All these years I spent on this mountain with the teacher, what have I been doing? Moreover, it's a very interesting, there's character here in the sense that he says, and I've been receiving the bows, the veneration of others. So he's sensitive to the fact that because he's a senior, because he's in this position, others are bowing and making offerings to him, and he's accepted that. But he also now recognizes that how could I then face myself and others accepting this and not really having broken through the riddle, not really being a teacher. And so his image, his facade is about to be shattered. Some of you maybe had a feeling like this. You've been turning in homework that your sister helped you with or your brother helped you with. And you got ideas of the exam beforehand, and so you're able to go in, and all of a sudden the teacher says, I'm going to do a quiz today, unprepared, and everybody just sit down, you're going to have to do it. And you're like, all of a sudden, I've been leaning on my sister, I knew the answer before, previously, now, the first time I have to show here. Same essay writing. If you accept students at a school, you allow them to submit essays. Now, some of you might be shocked to learn that they didn't write them themselves, even at graduate school. In fact, they hire people and pay up to $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 to write. Oh yes, come on, get real. To get this, not only the essays, but their whole portfolio together. Oh no, it's really slick. And anyways, but you know, the problem when the kid gets into school is all of a sudden that's all gone, and the teacher says, okay, so everybody just read an essay in class. And you go, right? So they want to go home and have a chance to compose it, download, cut and paste from something else. So in an ironic sort of way, it undermines confidence. The kid gets into the school feeling, wow, I'm really hot. But it's not really intrinsic. It's not from that essential element. It's borrowed and false. And so as a result, they either feel shattered and lack confidence, or they continue on a path of deception and cheating on into professional life. You'd be shocked to feel that there's professionals out there who, you know, I hope I'm not, you know, breaking bubbles here. So he says he's at that point, and then it says that night in the third watch around midnight, so no one would know, holding a candle, he wrote a verse on the wall that would reveal his insight. And so we'll stop there. But again, the way he does it, he goes at night with a candle, nobody's around, and he writes it. He's not signing it Shenxiu. He's just putting the verse on the wall, and then he's going to slip back into his room and hope for the best. Okay? So this sets the stage for the big confrontation. Of course, you probably know one other person will submit a verse after seeing this verse, and it'll be almost identical. And so it's really interesting to this verse, just a few changes in the words, and one gets the seal and the other one doesn't. And poor Shenxiu does not come out on top here. So it's a really interesting, and the verses are interesting because they reveal the fundamental two differences between the teaching, one being the gradual and this being the direct by the Sixth Patriarch. So the verses actually are interesting. And we'll stop there for time. But I said I'd read you a quick poem. Right? Ready? I'll keep it short because some of your eyelids are drooping. That could be that you're entering a deep samadhi and contemplating the lecture, or it could mean you're really tired. So this verse I'm going to read you tonight, kind of the theme of not taking life seriously. Let's see if I can find this one. So this is written by a nun called Xingang around 1600. And her background shows, again, she was talented and intelligent, but didn't have much chance to pursue education. Moreover, she had an disinclination for just education and really wanted to cultivate the spiritual life. And when she got into puberty, she openly expressed a desire to remain unmarried, which created a lot of turmoil. Her parents, however, insisted that she marry, and she was engaged to a young scholar. And now you can read this as you want, but just before they were about to marry, the scholar, because maybe he was studying too hard, just succumbed to an illness and died. Okay? And that sorrow more or less freed her up to do what she wanted to do, and she went out to become a nun. And so I'm going to read you one line from her poems tonight here. This is just a short one, but she's expressing the same thing the Fifth Patriarch was saying about the matter of birth and death. It's really serious, but you don't pay attention. So she says, this floating life, an ever-changing dream. This is wonderful. This floating life, meaning our life is like a floating bubble almost, an ever-changing dream. Yet we bitterly toil away. So this floating life, this ever-changing dream, yet we bitterly toil away. The entire day full of busyness as our karma grinds us down. If only you can make a clean sweep of the cave of ignorance, you'll be left with a life full of leisurely freedom and ease! Exclamation mark. So this is one of her verses that she wrote upon leaving, going into the convent, and into saying, even though her life was not bad, it's a dream, it's a floating. This idea of the floating appears throughout Asian literature too, is that this is a floating world. Our lives are floating. We're living in we're literally, and you think about it, the planet is floating. It's like, no, it's solid. No, this planet is just floating. So that was when the astronauts went out and got that first picture. You could see that this is just a floating ball, and we're floating within the float, and floating within the float, within the float, and so forth. And she's saying, if you can sweep clean the cave of ignorance, which is going back to that root, actually your whole life opens to ease. And this is talking about deep leisure and ease, a deep sense of contentment. So that's her verse. There's more to it, but I'll just do 4 lines for tonight. So we can all just float off and go back. Any other questions? Okay.
The question is, I paraphrase, why are people of the world not worried about the one great matter, just going on with life as they are?
Everybody hear that? Anybody want to take that on? That's a good question. Why do people don't pay attention and just go on in the world, just from state to state, and don't pay attention to the one great matter? Come on. Anybody? Huh? Oh, so it's because we're in a dream and we don't realize that we're in a dream. And so we don't realize that the one great matter is not a one great matter because our dream. That's one way. What were you going to say?
I guess I just look at every day, how you eat every day, and how much of every day you live in that dream, and then ask why.
Say it a little louder. I didn't follow that.
I guess you could look at your own day, how it goes, and how much of it is living in the dream, and how much of it is realizing the great matter, and then question why to yourself. Those moments when you're just living in a dream, why aren't you attending to the great matter in those moments during the day?
You think it happens during the day, or it doesn't happen.
I think it happens all the time,
But,
but we don't attend to them.
ah,
So if we want to know why other people don't, we have to look at why we don't every single second here.
okay, so one answer is we're aware of it, but we don't attend to it, which would mean we do a little bit of denial. So instead of sweeping clean the cave of ignorance, we just move the dirt over to another corner or under the rug. Right. What are you going to say?
Also, the world can seem very real and imminent. There's extreme pain and suffering on one side that one feels one has to deal with, and then there are all these sparkly, exciting, seductive things on the other side that seem very tempting to avoid the pain and suffering. Situation.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, this is a really, really deep question. Why is it if we know this, and we do know this, the French poet said, the human is the only animal that knows he will die, or she will die. Others die, but they don't know in advance, except a few seconds perhaps. But we know that we are going to die. So why is it that we know this, but then we slip into this. And that probably is, if you can understand that, you can understand everything in terms of the human condition. Why some people pay attention to it and some people don't. And you could say, according to Frost's poem, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took this one, and that's made all the difference. Which way you go down. But inevitably, no matter how much you deny it, it still will not be denied. And that becomes the problem. And so it's not necessarily the case that as people age, they get wiser, they can actually become more frantic if it's been denial. And later he says, this frantic passage through life ends with bitter regret. So he says, go ahead, don't pay attention to it, deny it. It's not going to run, you're not going to make it go away any more than the ostrich burying his head in the sand, makes the wolf go away. The wolf is still there, the ostrich just doesn't know it. But he said, if you waste your life in this form, not only will you not solve the riddle, but it'll end in bitter regret because you'll realize too late that probably one of the most significant gifts you have of human existence is the ability to penetrate and resolve this and look into it. But later, next week, I can talk about the Buddha said there were 3 responses to this. When people face it, there are 3 responses that come psychologically. And I can talk about that a little bit next week. It'll take a little more time, but it's interesting. Yeah, there's somebody.
Is it because people, I feel like many people do know that mortality, everyone knows about death. I wonder if it's because they feel like they don't know what they can do, or they feel hopeless.
Well, that's partly the case. And this would go into the Buddhist psychology. If you do not have any confidence that there's any technique or method or tool by which you can solve this problem, then to take it on without that confidence could easily lead to despair and to a wish not to live. And this is the basis of a kind of nihilism. And yet, the question arises, where does that confidence come from? So like when the Prince Siddhartha goes out, what confidence does he have that this is going to result in something? It's there, but where does that come from? That's an interesting question. Because this, in the sense of Buddhism, is what faith is about. It's not faith in other powers saving you. It's some kind of deep confidence that you have in the ability, your human ability, to not only take this issue on, but to wrestle with it successfully. And some people say, even if I don't wrestle with it successfully, better to take it on and wrestle with it sincerely and deeply than to deny it and pretend it's not there. That would be an intermediate between confidence I can do it and a sort of a sense that, well, if I don't, the rest of this is really kind of childish and stupid. But the mass of people live lives of quiet desperation, says Henry David Thoreau. I think he's talking similar to this. So behind all that, you can sense just how fragile that confidence is in the world, in the material things and whatnot. And as soon as you get the first diagnosis of something, the bubble pops like a bomb going off. No. I've eaten all the organic food. I've exercised every day. And it's like, sorry. Okay. Don't be despairing about it. This is not like heavy, man. This is just sort of the beginning of to be a live human being is to consider this question and look at it and see who said what about it and what can I learn about it and this is worthwhile doing. Why not? That's what I would say. Why not? Okay, good. Next week we'll go into this. Any announcements? No announcements. Guanyin session at the City of 10,000 Buddhas is the week after this coming week.
So is it the 17th?
See, this is our Chan class. They have no clock or calendar. They keep no track of time. Everybody's just sort of liberated from the past, present, and future. It's just...
Sunday the 12th. So it starts 11th in the evening. You go for 1 week, so 11th to the 18th. So if people want to go join a Guanyin session, you can still register online. and go up to the Siddhartha Buddha's public recitation.
If you do a 7-day session, it's one opportunity to explore how your mind works. You can take 7 days and you just use the recitation of Guan Yin as a backdrop to observe your mind and get to know yourself. And that is probably one of the first steps you could take to answering or investigating this deeper question. So it's not like you're going to get awakened necessarily at the end of 7 days, but you will be in the right cave and you'll be sweeping the right dust. And so, you may not get it all cleaned out, you may stir the dust up, but it's still, you're working in the right area. So if you're serious about doing this, these sessions are good chances just to not leave it all behind permanently, but for 7 days. Not bad. 7 days, you just leave it all behind. In lieu of the fact that at some point it will leave you behind. Okay, we'll do the transference.